All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to How to Effectively Engage Your Ambassadors. It's the next in our series of webinars. We're certainly grateful for you to be here. Um, Looking forward to this conversation, looking for this presentation from Natalie. Just a few quick things of housekeeping, kind of go through the agenda. What this call is going to look like, what this webinar is going to look like. You can see on the right hand or the bottom side of your screen, there's two tabs. There's a chat function and there's a questions function. We encourage people to connect, talk with one another in the context of this conversation. And in the questions tab, that's where we're asking you to submit any questions that you may have relative to what our discussion will look like. We'll address all of those questions at the end. And if there's at any point, if we happen to run out of time, if we run over, know that a member of the SocialLadder team will reach out to you to address any remaining questions that you may have. And at the very conclusion, we'll do our drawing for a $100 gift card. So the creator economy has absolutely exploded. It's created an incredible, massive opportunity for brand marketing valued at well over $100 billion. 31% of that value coming from brand deals. So that is with individual creators partnering with brands to help amplify their messaging, to drive sales, to be really substantial growth drivers. And what's even more significant is a 50% year-over-year growth, which is pretty tremendous. But here's something to think about. Of those platforms that speak of influencers and affiliate platforms, they're really only designed for the top 5% of professional creators, which ignores the 95% of well over 50 million creators, 47 million of which identify as being amateurs. They're kind of left in the lurch. They're ignored. And so enter a product like SocialLadder. We approach this conversation of creator management holistically, because we understand that amateur creators are the central hub to the way that all of this works. Whether we're speaking of brand ambassadors, we're talking about employee advocates, we're talking about influencers, we're talking about affiliates. The amateur creator sits at the very center of that. And through our approach, what we're able to do is connect all of the pieces around that conversation, around relationship management, around communication, around all the social integration, the important part of being with measurements. We connect to all of that. And so one of the things that you'll hear a little bit in this conversation is the way that SocialLadder helps support not only discovery and scale, which bookends the conversation about ambassadors, but really what sits in the very center of that is how do we engage those ambassadors? We've loaded them in, we've recruited them, we've onboarded them, we've found them through discovery. And ultimately, we need to measure the success of their output and scale the programs. But what sits in the very center of that, the linchpin, is engaging those ambassadors. And that's a conversation that Natalie will take us through this afternoon. So with that, take it away, Natalie.
Hi, everyone, and hi, Jason. My name is Natalie, and a big thank you to you and to the SocialLadder team for having me today. So I have worked with SocialLadder both on the client side, where many of you are sitting right now, as well as a strategic consulting partner where we've worked together on over 30 clients over the past couple of years. And the reason that I first started consulting is candidly because I wasted a lot of time and a lot of money on the brand side trying to figure out what that secret sauce is to build an ambassador program. And not just building it, but then managing it and scaling it. And so I wanted to now get brands from A to Z as efficiently as possible. Okay, so assuming that you've already set up your ambassador program, you've recruited your ambassadors and have them executing tasks. Things have been going great for, let's say, a week, a month, maybe even years. But Jason, something you and I have talked about a ton is as more and more brands continue to introduce ambassador programs, the landscape becomes more and more competitive. And this introduces challenges of keeping your ambassadors engaged and loyal to your brand against the other amazing programs and products that are available now. This is a new a new issue that we didn't have a couple of years ago that I know a lot of brands are now facing. And additionally, as humans, we always want something new and exciting and fresh. So how do we keep ambassadors satisfied and excited about working with us month after month? These things may be concerns you've come across in your program, maybe things you anticipate in the future. And we'll talk through some of these common obstacles today during the presentation, or our fireside chat, we're calling it, even though I'll probably talk the whole time because that's what I like to do when talking about ambassador programs. But before we really jump in and tackle some of those big issues, I want to leave you with or introduce you to a higher level perspective that maybe you've thought about, maybe you haven't, but just kind of something to think about as we go through this conversation today. So when you look at your program, these are real people working really hard for your company towards your company goals. So ambassadors are a spoke in the wheel, just as you are as an employee of the company, and should be treated as one as well. You want them to hold that same importance because they are driving revenue, or they're driving growth or sales or whatever the metrics you are looking for, to help your company move forward, just as you are. So we really want to establish trust and respect and a two-way stream of communication throughout our program with our ambassadors. And that is a core element that works on long-term engagement with your ambassadors. So as we get further along in this conversation, I want you to think about that, but we can jump to the next slide.
Excellent.
Thanks, Jason. So 3 of those main common obstacles that we talked about that I want to really dive into today are creating new challenges, exciting rewards, and management at scale. So those are also 3 things that, good news is, we've already gotten questions on, Jason, when we asked all of you prior to jumping in. So I'm excited that these are already top of mind and hopefully can give you some clarity today. So obviously every program is different, and maybe your engagement is lacking because of one particular issue. However, in most cases, engagement comes from a combination of all elements of your program. So by taking a more holistic approach, we can ensure that all of your ambassadors feel immediately connected to your brand from day one, and we keep them engaged for years to come.
Yeah, I think, if I can pause you or interrupt you for a moment, Natalie, I think that's an important piece. You spoke about we think sometimes as engagement as being this external thing, right? Like if we do all of these things, if I check all of the boxes in these tasks, and I am really clear in my communication, and I'm setting really clear guidelines, and I have communicated those expectations, I've done all the things, then if I do all these things, at the opposite side of at the end part, my engagement is going to be through the roof, right? And then we think of it as this external thing. But I think it's worth mentioning that in order for engagement to truly happen, we have to think as human-centered organizations, whether we commit with employees, our fellow coworkers, other stakeholders, ambassadors, that if we apply that human touch, engagement will naturally follow.
You're exactly right. I'm really glad you brought that up. And something that you and I have also spoken about before is this concept of engagement being twofold. So when you look at an ambassador program engagement metrics, you're looking at completion rates, you're looking at how many views were on all the posts this past month, or how many posts were live. But in order to see that side of engagement, you have to first engage with the people who are making those things happen. So a lot of the conversation that we're going to have today is on the engagement between you and the ambassador that then unlocks that next step of engagement to actually having engaging activations. So onboarding is near and dear to my heart. If you've ever worked with me, you will know that I talk about it all the time. And I always say that behind recruitment, it is the second most important piece of an ambassador program. And it really is that day one engagement with that ambassador that engages them from the beginning and establishes that meaningful relationship that will take you through the months and years to come. Not to mention, as the program scales, we want to make sure your branding stays consistent and we're always putting our best face forward out in the field. This actually is the largest churn period for an ambassador, and it's before they ever begin. So there are some things we can do to immediately engage those ambassadors during the onboarding process that you'll be very grateful you did in the long run. So here's a couple that I pulled out that I've seen a lot of success with. A group video onboarding session. So this gives the ambassador a chance to meet the community manager and other ambassadors face to face. They then can kind of establish trust with you. I know it's over Zoom, but face to face goes far. I think we've all learned that in the past couple of years. And it also establishes a sense of community. A training manual quiz. So we want to make sure that these ambassadors actually went into SocialLadder, they read the training manual and gathered those key components. And in addition to just making sure they understand what is expected of them in the program, this actually gets them completing a challenge within SocialLadder and understanding how they complete a challenge, how they earn rewards, and it gets them just doing something right off the bat. That kind of leads me into getting started challenges. And the training manual quiz can be one of those, but there are some other, small, non-time consuming and not necessarily marketing related challenges that gets them activated. So, little things like fill out this form, follow us on Instagram, anything that really they can just kind of have a quick win on. Last thing, and this is obviously not for all programs because it does take a good time commitment, but hosting a one-on-one meeting with each ambassador. This can also be a required kind of intro challenge or getting started challenge when they first log into SocialLadder. And pro tip, I love to use Calendly. It's just super easy for ambassadors to jump in and grab 15 minutes with you whenever they need it.
Yeah, that's a great tip.
Yes, we're a big fan. And so by doing this really, again, starts your relationship off on the right foot. You can answer any questions that they have about the program, get to know them, take an interest in their lives. Just that little conversation can really go a long way. So creating challenges. This is something that we have gotten a bunch of questions on. So I'm actually going to introduce challenges or tasks, whatever you call them. And then I want to do a little bit of a workshopping type task, for lack of a better word, with all of you today that I think is really going to help you organize your challenges and help you be creative and help come up with really engaged tasks. So when I was managing ambassador programs, I can remember sitting down a couple days before the start of the new month and thinking, oh shoot, how am I going to create 8 fun, exciting challenges? And being forced to be creative was really hard for me in a pinch. So the last thing we want to do is just come up with random challenges, throw them into SocialLadder, and we're not even sure they're being productive or working towards our goals. So eventually became wiser and started to try this thing called preparing. So that's something I'm going to help you guys work through. And one of the things there is you can actually jump to the next slide. So when creating monthly challenges, we want to cover each of the company's KPIs or maybe your team's goals. And each month we can think through those different initiatives and create challenges around them. I also recommend sitting down with your internal team, whether that's during your all hands or your marketing sync, whatever that is, prior to the beginning of each month, and just really understanding what the top asks are from each of the different departments or people, and understanding what their goals are, what they're working on, and then kind of see how your ambassador program can support that. Or maybe you can create a challenge around helping them hit their goal. I'm all about let's jump in the same boat and row the same direction. So that helps us do that. So with this, it does look like a Google spreadsheet because it is. And that is just the way that my brain works. My brain works in Excel sheets. But if you are a more visual person, you could do slides or, a document, whatever that is. This just helps me visually organize it. And here's where our workshop moment can kind of begin. If you want to pull up a sheet, you can, or we can just talk through it together. So what I want to first show you before diving in is this column B, which is titled initiatives, or it can be challenge categories, whatever you want to call it. And I want you to think about 5 to 10 different initiatives for your company or department that you're currently working towards. Jason, do you have any off the top of your head?
Gosh, yes, as a matter of fact. So I think from my perspective, inside of my role with SocialLadder, I'm always thinking about ways to um, diversify and elevate the style of writing that we offer, right? And so as that connects to connecting with our customers, to me, if I'm scanning through this list, that looks very much to me that connects on two stages, that connects to brand awareness and community engagement.
Amazing. So we could even check off 2 in 1 challenge if we wanted. And I hate to put you on the spot like that, but I knew you have the answer. um, so these initiatives that are in column B right now are just examples. They're not going to be the same for every brand or company, but here's just some general ones that can kind of help your wheels get turning. And as I've mentioned before, we always want to make sure. Again, these are working towards company goals. I can't emphasize that enough. The last thing we want to do is be wasting people's time and wasting money, having ambassadors do challenges or tasks that aren't productive. So on the flip side, it also helps us when we have these categories, we can use them as almost a menu of sorts to help us think about challenges when we're having a stuck moment where we're not being very creative.
Yeah. And then to add on to that, I think, because I approach things from a content perspective, very much it's often when you start doing this kind of ideation, you realize you have much greater access to resources than you may originally think. Like there's that moment of going, oh my gosh, how am I going to talk about product? How am I going to create a challenge around this? And I think in that conversation, in the spirit of ideation, you realize, wait, I already have a lot of this stuff. So I'm not creating something out of nothing. It's adding an additional layer of context to something that may already exist.
You nailed it. And let's jump into the next slide with that. So here is an example of a brand's 5 different challenge categories that they chose and why. So I think that's the important thing too. So not only did they choose serves our hyperlocal efforts, amplifies our seasonal brand initiatives. That's always a fun one, by the way, is the seasonal moments. Fuels our content engine, builds our social presence, provide product feedback. But if you see those bullet points within, really give more examples of how we can diversify the content with each of those within each of those categories, or how our ambassadors can help execute on those. So if you create just a little almost matrix like this for yourself, it's so helpful as a reference to come back to.
And I will say, like, having done exercises kind of in this spirit in the past, I think it's really easy at a first blush to exist at this meta level. And it is challenging. And involves some kind of creative thinking to go, okay, well then what can I slot into those categories to satisfy those kind of main content buckets, right?
Exactly.
Or those main goals, how do I flesh it out and work backwards towards achieving these big pieces?
You nailed it. And on our next slide, that is where you can see it's the same slide as before, but you can see how now that we have these initiatives, how they plug back into the larger picture. So once you have everything plugged in, so we'll have, the week that you want this to be activated, the different initiative, the actual activation, what information does the ambassador need to know? How many reward points are associated with this? When they submit it, how do they do so? And then do they need any assets? That's a big one that sometimes we forget. If you want them to put flyers out, how are we going to provide them with those flowers? Oops. Flyers, not flowers. Flyers. Flowers would be a bit more difficult. But then once everything's plugged in here, it's just a plug and play into SocialLadder when it's time to import your next month's challenges. So when you sit in the all hands meeting or someone brings up an upcoming holiday campaign, I also like to have at the bottom the different months all plugged into this sheet, where I can hop into December and make a note to create a challenge that supports the holiday campaign when that time comes. So then when you are onto December tasks, you realize you already have a pretty good outline for what you need to do that month. So our next slide is our challenge checklist. And I'm not going to go through all of these different points right now. We'll circulate some of these, this toolbox to you later, but I like to go through these 7 different points anytime before putting a challenge out into SocialLadder. And the reason I like to do that is, again, to make sure we're not just doing things for the sake of doing them, but that they're actually productive. Is it clearly explained? Do they have what they need? Is it trackable? Does it drive sales? All of those good questions. And if it doesn't check off all of them, why not? And can you do anything to get all 7 of those checked off with every challenge you put out?
Yeah, I think that's a big one for me. And I think I imagine that's perhaps that's another area where people may get stuck. Is saying, well, if I can't answer yes to all of those questions, do I completely abandon that challenge, or do I simply triage it? Like, this is in my top. It is in my primary challenge, but it may be one that requires a little bit more tweaking. And maybe some of those questions aren't answered right now, but that doesn't mean that the challenge can't move forward.
So in the spirit of engagement, let's say it doesn't check off, or I guess it's more of a question rather than a check, but how would you do this task? That is my favorite one in there. And I think, no matter who you are sending out this challenge to, your answer should be yes. And if your answer is no, you are not going to keep your ambassadors engaged. If you're asking them to do ridiculous tasks, or how much time should this take to execute, versus how much are you paying them, right? Do those match up? And think about, would I do this at this time commitment for this reward? I think for engagement's sake, those are some of the biggest questions that we want to make sure are checked every time. Okay, our next point here is how much is enough? I think this was another question that was fielded earlier, is how many challenges should we put out and when? So my recommendation is somewhere between 4 and 8 challenges being live at a time in SocialLadder. I like to do it on a monthly basis, but per your marketing calendar, that might be different. You also can just drop in a challenge. If something feels timelier of the moment, there's a TikTok trending, you can always throw something in that is almost a surprise. But I think that's a really good number to have in the queue at once to give variety, but not be overwhelming. And I say non-mandatory. So that's another kind of caveat. Every program is different. Some programs can get away with making mandatory challenges and making it, you have to do all these things every month. But I do think that, as we mentioned earlier, with how much competition there is in the space, people don't necessarily want to be made to do things. So I like to make them non-mandatory. And another point I want to throw in here too is a 2 challenge minimum per month. So I always like to have in contracts that, or for the ambassadors, that if you don't perform at least 2 challenges 2 months in a row, you get removed from the program. And that really keeps the engagement high, it keeps the energy high. Everyone who's in the program we know is engaged, and it filters out those people who might not be the best fit. So that's another something that kind of goes in that how many challenges per month question. So our next slide here is about rewards. So the little headline there is give the people what they want. And I think that's something that we a lot of times forget. And we think there's some formula to what people want, how much they want per challenge. But what I would really encourage you to do is don't be afraid to ask them. And honestly, the other question we've gotten is, should I give products? Should I give cash? Should I give prizes? I think it's a combination of all three. If you're a company with a consumer product or paid technology, lucky you, you already have what the ambassadors want at a very low cost to you most of the time. And if they are a true ambassador of your brand, they're already consumers. So they will work for free product. And this is a win-win because we're also getting our product out into the field and into the hands of the right people. So if you have that at your disposal, that is amazing. Makes your life a little bit easier. And then if you do not have something necessarily of value, like a free technology, to gift to your ambassador, there's also other ways that you can engage through swag or through branded items, which is also a win-win because they now serve as a pretty inexpensive walking billboard wearing your company t-shirt or water bottle. And then cash, I mean, who doesn't like cash? If you're a program with a budget, this is a great place to allocate it. But your next question might be how much? And we can kind of work into that one of two ways. So you can either back your way in by looking at your monthly budget and how many ambassadors you have and seeing how much you can afford to pay per challenge, a very logical way to go into this. Or number two, you can kind of test out what is the right amount that ambassadors are willing to complete challenges for. So you could set challenges to how much you think they're worth and then get feedback by seeing how many people are completing those, what the feedback is. One point of caution here is I would recommend starting low because it's always easier to raise the price of what they will earn. It's a lot harder to have them earn less if you realize that you've started too high.
Right. And coming to the cash question, I think from a budgeting perspective, that's a fixed cost.
Yes.
So if a brand is, that they can devote X amount of dollars in gift cards or, ACH payments or whatever model or, particular flavor that cash payout takes, that's fixed cost and easier to account for.
Exactly. And then on a more fun note, we have prizes, which can be very fun. And these can either be always available in your program, or it can be a once in a while perk that gets everyone super excited. Let's say you need sales to go up really quickly at the end of the month, and you might want to drop in a really fun prize that people could work towards. But prizes really can be anything. Again, asking your ambassadors what they want and understanding their demographic. And for an ambassador program of moms, they might want a babysitter for a night versus an ambassador program for college students. They might want the hottest Balenciaga slides or I don't know, a gift card to their favorite bar. So yeah, this is a fun one, but definitely ask them what they want. So two things here, and kind of talking about what we talked about earlier is just as in your job, ambassadors want to feel like they are working towards something greater. They're expanding their horizons, they're earning more. And as they continue to work for your company, they feel like there's an end goal. So there's two different ways in which we can accomplish this. So first is creating an incentive structure. The more challenges they complete or sales they generate, the more they'll make. This keeps ambassadors working hard for your brand and gives them a nice kickback that, of course, they deserve. And the reward can be a higher commission rate. It could be a bonus system. It could be additional gifting opportunities, whatever that is. Just ask Mary Kay. They did this really well, and it works. And then our second option here, which can be coupled with, but is a hierarchy. So a hierarchy is great for two things when it comes to engagement. One, again, just as in your company, not everyone reports into the CEO. That would create quite a few issues, right, Jason? So same thing goes for the ambassador program. As it scales, there can be a different hierarchical, or there can be different hierarchical levels that create better lines of communication, more personalization, and even localized experiences for your ambassadors. And then number two, much like the incentive structure, many people are incentivized to work harder by the potential to earn a higher title or a larger paycheck. So by having higher level roles they can work towards, this keeps ambassadors working hard to potentially get that promotion and see a lifeline of their work with your brand. Again, kudos to Mary Kay. They really set the stage for all of us on these two items, but they work. So speaking of reward tiers, I personally have not worked with Pura Vida, but I know they are a great SocialLadder client who's really successfully implemented reward tiers. So as you can see here, they almost put together those two last topics, so incentives and hierarchy, where the more challenges or tasks they complete, the higher the reward is that they'll get, or they'll get another reward. So, you know, it starts out saying, complete this amount of challenges, get this item. Complete this amount of challenges, you'll get this item, so on and so forth. And that keeps ambassadors coming back for more, and they want that next item and will continue to work hard for it. So management. So we're working our way towards that little squiggle diagram that we started with. And coupling all of these different points, it may seem like a lot to digest at once, but an engaged ambassador program really does account for all of these different elements. It's not just one, unfortunately. But management is a big one. And depending on how far along you are with your ambassador program, it may be, you know, not taking up that much of your time right now. But maybe it should be, or maybe you have a full-fledged ambassador program and it is your full-time position. So I don't know about you, but I think when I first got into managing ambassador programs, I didn't think I'd be so deep in the weeds as a manager when I took this position. So maybe some of you are surprised as well. But there are a lot of things that you need to do to effectively manage tens or hundreds or even thousands of people. So to make it a little bit more digestible, I like to break down the responsibilities into 4 different categories: daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly. And these are not going to be the same. All these bullet points will be the same for every one of everything you need to do each month. But I also challenge you to workshop this exercise for your program specifically. And I also like to go ahead and just put all of these different things into my calendar on recurring, either daily, weekly, monthly, or quarterly, so that nothing falls off and it keeps you on track. So last but not least, and I swear I will stop boring you soon, but engagement tactics. So if you are planning to pay your ambassadors for their contributions, that is a pretty good retention tool in itself, as is good management. You know, if you don't have a good manager or your company is very disorganized, you probably don't want to work there. Same thing goes for your ambassadors. And the more that you maintain that close relationship with your ambassadors, the more engaged they will be with your program. Hopefully I have said that enough during this conversation today.
And it's worth repeating again and again.
It is, and I think it's just something that's missed as ambassador programs grow and scale. But I have just seen with the biggest programs and the biggest companies that it just holds true that it never fails to have that good relationship. And by doing this, it will indirectly drive higher quality content, more sales, more profits for your brand. So it is worth doing. And a couple of more direct tactics that we'll just briefly chat about that can enhance that is competition and acknowledgement. So I think that we got a question earlier about creating competition. So how should we gamify? How should we compete? So this is something that's very fun and can always be something you can drop in when maybe sales are a little down, morale's a little down, engagement's a little down. And you can even have a cash prize or something really fun. This particularly works well with college campus programs, just because they're already in groups or they're on campuses, and they can kind of work against each other, and it's very fun. So a little healthy competition never hurt anyone. And then acknowledgement. So if someone went above and beyond, I would call them out. You can use the social ladder chat to do so, make an example of it, and reward that ambassador with something that is meaningful. And then other people look to that and say, wow, I want to work really hard so I can get the shout out, or I can get the, the gift or whatever it is from the brand. It really does go a long way, and people will continue to work hard if they think that they'll be rewarded for it. So, we can go on and on about all of these different things, but I promise we will stop it there. I really hope that some of the things that we talked about today were directly applicable to you and where your program is today. And you can always reference back to some of these tools and this conversation. I'm sure Jason will circulate this webinar out to you. And yeah, if there's anything that we missed, feel free to send more questions our way or see how we can ever be a resource to you.
Yeah, and to close with that, know that this conversation never stops, right? It's not like you don't suddenly solve the engagement challenge. It just continues to evolve, and so the tactics will certainly evolve. But I think it bears mentioning that if you keep it simple and you remember that your ambassadors are human beings and are motivated by very human needs and wants, engagement will come naturally.
Exactly. You nailed it.
Excellent.
You listened.
Yeah. I have one question in the chat that's from Emma. Thank you, from Austin. One question I have is, how do you come up with effective challenges that people will want to contribute to? Great question. Staying organized and giving yourself enough time to think about all these different challenges. I don't know about you, but I get very crunched at the last minute and think about how can I create these exciting, fun challenges. And if we kind of stay organized and plan in advance, which I'll give you some tools to do so, those are my best 2 pointers on that. Let's see what other questions we have here. Again, from Emma. I would also be curious as to how successful the points rewards versus cash system reward is. Another great question, and again, something we will talk about today. And Cliff Notes version is, I really like a combination of, well, I guess points and cash. I like a combination of rewards, merchandise, cash, all working together, where people can kind of take what incentivizes them specifically, and giving everyone a variety.
I have a question here from Eddie. Eddie, thank you for your question. What are some of the most successful strategies from brands that you've worked with that have been used to recruit and make the most of ambassadors?
Yes, and a fully loaded question it is. I'm not sure if you were able to jump into our last webinar, totally focused on recruitment. And the reason we started with that webinar is that it really is the first and most important thing that you do, obviously, when starting an ambassador program, and making sure that those ambassadors are engaged in the long run. So recruiting the right people first. Second is the onboarding process. And that's something that we covered in the last webinar a little bit, and then we'll cover a little bit today as well. And that the onboarding really is the first time to make that relationship and establish trust with those ambassadors, get that face-to-face interaction with them, and immediately activate those ambassadors into your program. So that is definitely a big chunk of how do we get from A to B to then C, which we'll talk about more in depth today, is how do we keep them engaged in the long run? So, once you've recruited those right ambassadors, once you've gone through a great onboarding with them, how do you month after month or year after year keep them engaged? And again, fully loaded question. And there's a lot of different elements. Every program's different. There's not a one-stop shop solution. But for me, looking at it holistically, and all the different elements that can contribute to higher engagement in your program are all things that go into that overall engagement that we'll talk about today.
Another really fantastic question that we've just inputted. This one's coming from Morgan. Morgan asked, do you find that there's a good strategy for ramping people up and getting them in the habit of logging in and then looking forward to the next challenge?
So we want to make sure that the challenges are different all the time, that they're covering a variety of different mediums, of different types of challenges, so that they're not seeing the same challenges month after month. I know that's easier on us on the management side, but for ambassadors, they'll eventually get burnt out if they just see the same things over and over again. So that's definitely something that we'll workshop in the webinar, and how we can continue to create variety in our challenges, and help you think of highly engaged tasks to put in every month.
Here's one to really get you thinking, Natalie. As if you look back at all the brands that you've worked with, could you provide an example for the group of brands that you've worked with that you've helped build programs from the very beginning, from scratch, about the steps that you took to really build what that first round of challenges looked like, and then how that was then utilized to build a foundation for subsequent challenges to build engagement beyond the initial enthusiasm of being admitted into the program?
Mm-hmm. So what I like to do when we're first starting a program is create almost onboarding challenges of a sort, where we'll put some different tasks into SocialLadder that are just very basic, kind of short and sweet challenges that get them immediately using the SocialLadder tool and get them comfortable with it. Some examples of these initial tasks that we'll put in would be things like complete this form about who you are, or your t-shirt size, or something just small like that. Make sure that you've read the training manual and take this little quiz to make sure that you understand all the different elements of the program. Follow us on Instagram, follow us on TikTok, little things like that, where they can already see points or rewards racking up. They can already see how to use the tool, and it immediately engages them. So a huge point of drop-off in an ambassador program is once the ambassadors are recruited, if you don't immediately engage them, they'll lose interest or fall off, which we don't want. So then once they've engaged with those initial challenges, how do we keep them engaged? Going back to the last question a little bit, is keeping that variety and of the different challenges, and then also having them work towards something. So creating an incentive structure or a hierarchy where they can grow within the program, or they can get into that higher tier where they're making more money or more rewards. The way that I like to think about ambassador programs is really thinking about it like a mini company. So treating it just as so, and thinking about, you and your job and why you want to keep working there. Is it because you feel like you could move up to the next role, that you could make more money? that, whatever those things are, the same sorts of things should go into your ambassador program as well, on a little micro scale. But these are people and they want the same things that everyone else wants.
Andrea asks, how do you break past ambassadors who don't want to post onto social because they're afraid of feeling too, quote, salesy to their friends?
I love that question. And I have so many different answers, actually. I will start with first recruitment. Why did this person, if posting is a big requirement of your program and this person's not comfortable sharing on social media, why is this person in the program? First of all, if that was clearly explained to them in the first place, that this was a requirement of the program. Being an ambassador in this day and time does, for the most part, mean that you will be sharing on social media and you will be selling to your friends. So, getting the right people in the right seats, I would say, is number one. And there are different types of ambassadors that we can have. We can have people out in the field. We can have people helping us with partnerships or events or other responsibilities. But if it is a more traditionally sensed ambassador program, they should be okay with sharing on social. I do also understand that you don't want to continue to push it on your followers time after time after time. So that really does lie in the hands of us as the program managers to create challenges that don't feel salesy, even if they are social specific. So if your ambassadors are having a hard time coming up with the right way to say it or the right way to sell it, that's a place where we can step in and get more creative with those challenges where honestly the ambassador might not totally know that they're selling it by the way that you phrase the challenge, or even giving them talking points for here's some options of how you could say this, or position it differently where it's not just sell, because that does get exhausting both for them and for the followers. So kind of back to creating those super challenging or those super interesting challenges.
Jill asks, while there may be a difference depending on the brands, but do you have a baseline for how frequently you provide challenges to your ambassadors?
Yes. So the way that I like to work, and again, everyone is different, everyone's program is different, but I suggest doing monthly challenges. So you can put them in at a different cadence. So, if you do have a challenge that needs to be completed within the 10th to the 15th of the month or on a specific day in the month, you can drop that in at any point when that challenge or task should be completed and should be active. The numbers wise, I like to say between 6 and 8 challenges a month is kind of a good blanket statement for giving the ambassadors enough challenges to keep them interested and enough variety where they can choose the ones that feel most natural to them to complete. But not an overwhelming amount. I've seen, people throw in 20 challenges in there before. And personally, if I were to log into SocialLadder and see 20 challenges, I would probably just get stage fright and not do anything. And it also just it makes sure that those challenges that are in there are higher quality challenges that we're sure are working towards one of your goals or initiatives for that month. That being said, you can drop them in however you wish at whatever cadence. But personally, I like to think about them on a month-to-month basis.
Excellent. 2 more questions outstanding here, and then we'll bid adieu for our time together. Mary Grace asks, I would love more info on a successful brand and what they did to become that successful on a more micro level.
I will give an example. So there's a client that I work with that is a household name. They've been around for probably 50 years. And they decided to launch an ambassador program last summer. And what's so unique about the way that they went about this is that they actually didn't go into the ambassador program with the hopes of hiring thousands of people and sending their message out everywhere and taking over social media. They really went into it with the notion of, we want to help small business owners and make those our ambassadors and support those small business owners in their efforts. And from there, once they engage that group of ambassadors, maybe 50, 60, 70 ambassadors, and held really, really tight relationships with them, where it was a two-way street of, hey, we can support you by giving you access to the products that we have in our company. And in turn, we just want you to share about your experience with us, with your community. So it started in a non-salesy, non-social way. And by creating those relationships and that foundation of trust and support and really supporting one another, they actually have the most engaged ambassador program I've ever seen in the 30 plus programs that I've worked on before, and have those ambassadors continuously posting on their behalf, continuously talking on their behalf, selling product. But it came from a very organic sense that really was rooted in relationship. And that being said, any brand at any size can do that. It just does take more work on your brand side internally for someone to really dedicate their time to establishing those relationships and supporting the program in a smaller, more meaningful way.
All right. Thanks for that, Natalie. And here's our final question. And I think this is a really great one to end on, to really kind of give people something to chew on as they move forward. Is David asks, I see that gamification works. What is too much or too little to ask of ambassadors?
Great question. And I think it depends a little bit on if it's a college program or if it's not. Probably a lot of the programs that we're working on are more college focused, and in that way, it's a better group to gamify with, because they are already in communities, they're already in social groups, they're on different campuses, and there's kind of an easy way to have people working against each other or have that competition, and it's more fun and it's more youthful, and I think college students enjoy that more. Whereas with adult ambassador programs, I would suggest, maybe some gamification here and there, but actually more of a hierarchy or incentive structure that's just a little bit more sophisticated, I think resonates well with adults. Again, if you turn it back on you, is it worth your time to go and game this ambassador program? Or would you rather, see yourself working up towards a goal that you have? So, that could differ for each brand. Some brands are just more youthful and fun and easier to gamify, but that would be my suggestion there.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end. Again, thank you so very much for being patient and trying to extract every bit of insight that we could from our time together. Again, we will be rescheduling this webinar, the full presentation as intended. Hopefully you'll be able to join us. I will make this recording available and you'll be able to pull everything that you can, as well as additional resources that you may find helpful. And again, thank you so very much for joining us. Look forward to hearing from you soon.
Yes, thank you, everyone. I apologize as well. And don't worry, I will re-wear the same top on our next webinar so you all can see it.